Well, God bless you guys. Good morning. You look fantastic. Thank you for being here today. Hey, we are continuing. I'm going to hop right in if that's okay. We're continuing a message series called Mind Your Own Busyness. And the reason I felt sort of impressed to do that at the beginning of this year, not only at the beginning of this year, but takes so much time. Normally we only do about a 4-week series, and we're going to do an 8-week series this time, because I feel like it's super, super important for us to just hang out in this concept for a little bit of family, faith, and finances, because they're the 3 areas of our life that we are most busy at, or should be the busiest at, but often spin our wheels most often. In other words, we produce a lot of busyness. By the end of 2018, we're going to be tired, we're going to look back, we're going to be grateful to move on to 2019, because it's just been one of those years. The question will be, after all of that business, will we have produced anything worthwhile? And the 3 areas that I think are most important for us to put God first and make sure that all that we're doing honors Him, and if, of course, Scripture is true and we know it is, the Word says that if we seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, then all these things shall be added unto us. And so the concept for you and I is putting our time in the right place, putting our busyness, our resources, our effort, and our energy in the right place. And so if you missed the first few weeks, make sure to hop online. You can download the Summit Church app. Just put in Summit Church Lincoln into your app store and it'll come up. And you can watch those messages. And last week we wrapped up the financial part, did a little interview with Drew Bartlett. And if you missed that, make sure to grab that. And also, the first Wednesday of March, FPU starts, Financial Peace University, and you can connect with Drew, and you can actually sign up for that group as well. And we want to get you plugged into more resources to help move you forward in your finances. But today, I'm really excited to have a new friend with me. Actually, it's sort of odd and weird how I got to know Tony Overbay. I would hear this strange man in my house every morning, and his voice as Lisa was getting ready, and I was a bit slower to get ready, and I'd be trying to watch TV or something as she was getting ready, and she'd have this podcast nice and loud so she could walk around the bedroom and the bathroom, and she'd be listening to his podcast. And I found myself, after hearing it once or twice, turning off the TV and just listening. And I've shared with you guys many times before, I have difficulty focusing a lot, sometimes even in conversations with you. If I've ever walked away in the middle of a conversation, you know I love you, and just my ADD, I saw a squirrel or something shiny and a spoon on the ground and I ran. I needed to pay attention to that. And I found myself really focused and able to stay connected, and I really, really connected with what was very practical, what was very balanced, and what was a very healthy approach to both parenting and marriage. And so we're going to spend some time talking to Tony Overbay today, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I asked him to meet with us today and put together just his 4 big rock items, basic practical things that you and I could start doing today to start building a healthy marriage. So would you help me welcome Tony Overbay?
Thank you, Chris. And I have to tell you, I didn't know, I can't see a thing up here, right? So if people are smiling at me, this is a universal smile to everyone. But it's great to be here. Thank you.
So take 30 seconds and tell us about your family, tell us about your background, just let people get to know you first.
Sure. So we actually moved to Lincoln in 1993. So it was when I don't quite qualify as old Lincoln, but I wasn't new Lincoln. I was kind of in that transitionary period. But I have 4 children, and they are all currently in the teenage years, so I can say I have 4 teenagers.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been married to my wife for 27 or 28 years. I would have to do the math, right? But
Wait a second. You're here to talk about marriage, and you don't know how long you've been married?
But I'm being vulnerable, and I'm being authentic right now. That's what I'm doing. But it's been a wonderful marriage for a very long time. And math is my weakness. They're here, exactly, which I'm grateful for that.
Awesome.
But yeah, and actually for about 10 years in Lincoln, I wrote a humor column, and that was some of the most fun I had here. So
really?
Yeah, and then got away from that, and then made a transition a little bit mid-career to become a marriage and family therapist. And actually, I felt called to do it, and I'm just grateful to have kind of gone down that journey. But I apologize for you hearing me in your bathroom in the mornings. That's a little bit odd, right?
Well, it's been really good, and before we're done, hopefully one of us will remember to figure out a way how we can communicate that they can start listening to the podcast. Because it is, I want to say this, listening to a podcast, watching a TV show, reading a book is not good replacement for therapy. If your marriage is in
Sure.
trouble or it needs tune-up or you need help, those things are good. It's always good to keep good information coming, but they're definitely not a good replacement. And so today is, like we said last week, the beginning of a conversation for marriage health. It's not the conclusion for marriage health. So let this sort of stimulate in you the desire to really start moving your marriage forward. So again, what I asked Tony to do is put together 4 things that he would give every single one of us to help build a better marriage. So Tony, in order for us to start today building a better marriage, what's the number one thing that we can
So
start
very
doing?
first, we need to create a listen first attitude.
Okay.
And I think that's a little more difficult than we anticipate, to be able to tune out that automatic part of us that wants to respond, that we feel like if we are good listeners, and there's a great term called active listening, but active listening doesn't mean what story do I have that I can get to that will really impress this person as they are talking to me, right? Yeah. I know you have a couple of scriptures that I think lay it out perfectly.
Yeah, James 1:19 says, always be more willing to listen than to speak. And then I like what it says in Proverbs 18:13, let people finish speaking before you try to answer them. That way you'll not embarrass yourself and look foolish.
Right, because we're making these assumptions that we already know where this conversation's going, and we want to come up with a story that we feel like that, okay, now we're really engaged because we're swapping stories. I remember when I first went to graduate school, literally the very first exercise they had us do was pair up with someone, and we had to listen for a minute without getting our response ready. And I would love for you to go home and try that today, whether it's with your spouse or a child, but try and have a conversation where you are just listening and you're not trying to say, they'll be impressed if I tell them this, right? Or here comes a story that I think will be better. Oftentimes we get in that that one-upsmanship. Yeah. And I think ultimately then that kind of shuts us down, and then we kind of feel like, you don't get a medal at the end of every conversation, every transaction of, your story wins, right? So, I think, and that's something that we have to work on. I did pull up something, and I know it's a little bit off script, but I just had to share. Yesterday I spoke to a group, and I love to start with differences between men and women, and this is one I found that was really interesting. There's a study out of the Netherlands that monitored the brain activity of males and females as they process white noise and music. And the females had an intense response to both sounds, the white noise and the music. The males responded to the music, but they deactivated to the white noise as if they didn't hear it. And the theory there, this is going to get better too, I apologize. The theory there is that because during the male fetal brain development, testosterone impacts the formation of the auditory system, making it block out unwanted noise and repetitious acoustic stimuli. So one more paragraph, I promise. This will make sense, right? So the big issue in male-female relationships is often, I get to hear in my office where a woman might say, I have to repeat myself several times to get any response out of him, right? I don't know if that's kind of ringing a bell. So she'll repeat herself several times, which makes his brain register her voice as, quote, unwanted repetitious acoustic stimuli. And so before you know it, it devolves into this he never listens, and she's always nagging. And so a lot of us get stuck in this feedback loop of behavior, and then now we kind of get this chicken and the egg scenario, right? So it's does my mom say the same thing 500 times because my dad doesn't hear, or has my dad tuned her out because she repeats herself? So, so it takes work to listen.
Yeah, so do you have any sort of advice for, because that makes perfect sense. I think it makes perfect sense to everybody. Maybe just for men, what is something they can do to be more active and intentional in their listening? How do they tune in so that their wife feels heard?
Yeah, this is the part where I don't say they can't, right?
Okay.
No, they really can. No, they're really very capable. So, but it's an active process, and I think we're gonna get to some of this as well. Okay. One of the words I love is just awareness. I mean, the first step to that is being aware and saying, okay, I actively have to listen. And we're gonna find ourselves, especially, and some of these are very stereotypical, but the man brain way to fix, we wanna fix, right? And oftentimes we have to turn off that, I wanna fix that, I wanna fix that, I wanna fix that. So just being aware, and we're gonna be able to maybe talk a little bit about this later, but I want to be able for people to say in that moment, monologue, say, okay, I'm wanting to fix right now. Is that what you want? And then not be offended when she says, no, not really.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Good.
Yeah. So cultivate this listening. It is something that takes work. And the more repetition we do, the better we get at it. To the point of now where I can find myself I am just listening, and I have to say, I think this is the part where I'm supposed to respond, where I'm supposed to give the classic therapist, and how do you feel about that, right? Okay.
Right. Now, do you make your wife lay down on a couch and you sit behind her in a chair
that's
with a notepad?
no. We need to talk. We'll have to switch chairs for that one. I mean, I have to watch out for that. Imagine what it's like being married to a therapist, or if that's your dad, right? Yeah. So I have to, I'm immediately trying to not use therapist words.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, listen first attitude.
Sure.
To get busy building a better marriage, what's the number 2 thing you do?
So number 2 is now we're going to start working with what I feel is one of the big moments, cultivating an empathetic heart. So you have a great scripture here from Romans. When others are happy, be happy with them. If they are sad, share their sorrow. So good. Be happy with them. Empathy. I love the concept of when we think of empathy, we can get confused with empathy and sympathy. So I like to kind of put it this way. If you come upon someone and they are down in this pit, this hole, this ditch, whatever, sympathy is looking over the edge and saying, man, I feel bad. That looks really rough, but I kind of got to go, But I will be thinking of you. I really will, right? And it breaks my heart that you're in there. Yeah. So empathy is you jump down in the hole with them, and now you're saying, okay, this is rough. Like, what do we do with this, and what have you done to get out of these holes before, and what kind of skills do you bring to the table, that sort of thing. Empathy is really trying to be in that person's shoes, so my ADD brain just went to this, you hear this comment all the time where it says, before you judge someone, you want to walk a mile in their shoes, right? Because then you're a mile away from them and you have their shoes. And I don't think that's how it was supposed to be, but the concept is good, right? Yeah.
Okay, give us something practical that, is there a difference in men and women's capability or readiness to be empathetic versus sympathetic?
Yeah, that was a very nice word choice. Their readiness, right?
Right.
Yeah, what's the biggest challenge here? And I think it does go back to, in essence, it is kind of the fixing and judgment part of the brain. So I think that a lot of men, and we can kind of trace this back to the hunter-gatherer, the man is I will go and forage and bring back, and wife will be impressed with the things that I have brought, that I am fixing things. Right? So I think a lot of times, even when a wife might be sharing, this is my frustration with the day, and husband goes immediately into, why didn't you, or I would have, or that sort of thing. Those are all fixing and judgment statements, and those kind of shut down this free flow of communication. Wow. So the empathy is like, hey, tell me more about what was going on. Give me the whole layout of your day, what was happening. And now we're back to that number 1, listening. Turn off, I do this, turn off the part of your brain that wants to fix and judge. Now, we're going to give you some nice dialogue down the road to be able to, after you kind of have connected with your partner and you understand them more, you can say, man, I'm wondering if you want me to try to fix this. Usually the answer is no. Or, man, I wonder if this would have worked, or what about this, or I know you're good at, and so instead of these, why didn't you, or those kind of shutting down statements. Right. So cultivating that empathy, it really is, you're trying to get more into their experience, what that was like for them, not just trying to say, yeah, you did that wrong.
So let me ask you this. And men probably aren't as inclined to process out their emotions.
Sure.
Or share troubles with their wife. Or if they do, it's a very declarative statement. It's this guy at work did this, and he's already resolved what he's going to do about it. Yeah. And then his wife may come from her position and try to be empathetic and get a little shut down. What are some things that from maybe a female perspective they can do to successfully draw out better conversation with their husband? Yeah,
and I think a lot of females are good at that, where maybe more of that empathy about, how frustrated were you, or that doesn't seem fair, or tell me more about what that experience was like. I think that kind of comes naturally, but at times that almost then just kind of feeds this, I got this thing figured out, I solved it, I fixed it mentality, right? I want to have more of an open communication where it's, what do you think I should have done, and we're going to get there, which I think is going to actually kind of lead more into part 3. I want to talk really quick too, when I'm on this empathy part, I remember when I was becoming a therapist, I was a shiny new therapist, a lot of people think that, and I love when I hear somebody say, I would be a good therapist because I know how to tell people what to do, right? And that one's kind of goes against what we're trying to do. But I had an instructor talk about one time, what we're trying to do is, and I think that this is a lot of the way that God works, is where, we think that somebody's going to stand, if we're at this wall and then, the therapist is over there, then they're just going to say, okay, come on, get over here, watch out for the chairs, move left, move right, duck under this one. And that doesn't teach this person much of anything, right? So what a therapist does, or I think what God is ultimately the greatest at, is he going to get right over there beside you and then say, where are we going, right? And then when we get to the chair, and it's like, what do you want to do with the chair? Do you want to go under the chair? Do you want to pick the chair up? You've got your own experiences of like, maybe you were attacked by a group of chairs as a child, and that's a traumatic experience for you. So you want to go completely around the chairs, but that's more of like what we're trying to get to, even in a partnership. So even when you're saying, how can a wife kind of get to this place for more productive communication, we're going to kind of break this thing down at the root level and change the whole paradigm of communication. So when we have this listening and this empathy that's been cultivated, now we're right there together. And now we feel like we can trust each other with our emotions, with what our experiences are, and now we can kind of process these things together. So did I avoid your question? Did I do that, or was that?
No.
All right, okay, good.
No,
okay.
Plus I think you were saying we're going to kind of reconnect with the question in point
You bet.
3.
Yeah, and I thought as well here, this does go more to that, you teach a man to fish, that concept, that we learn about in the gospel. We're trying to nurture these relationships and then help the couple now grow together. Instead of having one person feel like, I'm always doing something wrong, or you're always going to try to fix me.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, and this is an observation you can push back on, and it's not an indictment of men, but I know that when I'm feeling, maybe I felt attacked by somebody, or I felt frustrated about something, when I process out loud with Lisa, I'm often looking for an advocate, not really anyone to give me true feedback. I want her to tell me I'm right.
Yeah.
I want her to join in I want her empathy to be, you're right.
Yep.
I don't need any pushback. I don't need her to say, which she's inclined to do because she has better judgment than me.
Sure.
She's inclined to go, honey, now it sort of feels like you're overreacting to that. Or I want her to just go, yeah, I'd be mad too. And then I feel uncomfortable when she is.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I feel weirded out when she is, because I'm like, shouldn't you be telling me to behave better than this right now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, so that leads perfectly into number 3, which is we're now going to connect with it's a compassionate spirit. So this is where the magic starts to happen. We're laying those fundamental foundational principles of listening and empathy, and now we get to the part where, as a marriage therapist, this is where my work really starts to, you see just immediate change or miraculous change in people. So I really connect with this. Well, first of all, most marriage therapists, if I'm top secret, don't really like couples therapy. Because you end up being in this position as a referee. Couples will come to you and say, I'm going to tell you my version, and she's going to tell you her version, and you just need to tell us who's right. And that is a horrible place to be as a marriage therapist, right? So, and
which is why I think a lot of people get frustrated with the therapy process.
Absolutely, they do.
And quit on it.
Yeah, and so a lot of therapists who haven't really tried to do a lot with couples therapy will maybe have a couple or two. They're not really solid. They've learned reflective listening skills, where it's why don't you say what you say, and then you get the spouse. So how did you hear that? What did you hear? And then you kind of do both of those. Feels a little bit better, and then you just say, all right, you guys fix it, right? Yeah. And that doesn't work because we really don't get anywhere. So I really doubled down on my training around couples therapy, and it's around this. It's an evidence-based modality called EFT, emotionally focused therapy. And I know, so this is the book. It's kind of the easy guide to EFT. It's called Hold Me Tight. It's by a psychologist named Sue Johnson. And EFT is evidence-based, but it's a completely different paradigm of the way we're going to communicate as a couple. I had a guy tell me just last week, and I love this. He said that when he finally understood the concepts of EFT, he had to deconstruct his entire way that he communicates. Because here's what's underneath EFT. When we are going to communicate with our partner, we are looking at this as, we're about to be pretty vulnerable. And I go to this place when I speak. I always say, we're about to say, I'm going to show you a little bit of my heart. So whatever this is, I'm frustrated at work, I'm frustrated with the kids, I don't know what to do about something. That is an emotional bid in the world of EFT. We're going to say, I'm going to trust you a little bit with my heart. What are you going to do with it? So the key here now is that response. So, and if we had more time, but the book does a nice job. EFT is all based on what's called attachment theory, and this is from the beginning of our being nurtured by our parents or trying to connect to friends. We're constantly kind of looking for who we can share our heart with and what they will do with it. Will they respect it? But as they don't, or as we have these experiences that don't feel comfortable, we start to put up walls and we kind of hold back our heart. So we're looking for these groups or people that we feel safe with. Now, oftentimes we will even misinterpret situations when we put our heart out there where someone might be kind of coming on strong or fixing your judgment, and then we learn to now we're going to kind of put our heart back away, right? We're going to hold it back. Because now here's where we get a little bit more into the dynamics of men and women as, stereotype.
Right.
But when man brain is the strong and silent type, rub a little dirt in it, don't cry, you're going to be made fun of, that sort of thing, right?
Right.
So now he goes into this relationship with his partner to get married, and he's like saying, okay, I kind of feel safe sharing my heart a little bit here, but I also, if I go big, if I like cry at like a chick flick or something like that, she's gone, you know? So sometimes, he's, I'm holding it back, but really all she wants him to do is cry at the chick flick, right? So EFT starts talking about what are these emotional bids that we put out, and then how do we respond? So if we say we had a hard day at work, and I love where you were going with this, that's an emotional bid. So we want our partner, we want to know that they are a safe place. So if they return back and say, okay, that's ridiculous. Everything's going great with you at work. You make great money, whatever. Are we going to continue to go home and say, man, I've had a rough day at work?
Right.
No, we're going to, I know what she's going to say to that, right? Yeah. And so that's the same where when our wife wants to come to us and say they are frustrated about anything, their workout that day, a parenting issue, something going on at school or church, and if our immediate response is going to be, okay, that's ridiculous. You are a good person, and we could even be coming from a good place when we do that, but we're kind of shutting down this emotional bid.
And do you think a frustration that couples experience is that what is a big deal to you is not a big deal to your spouse, and so we use our own watermark, our water level for determine, like you go, well, that's just silly.
Absolutely.
Why would you be upset about that?
Yeah, instead of, so now go back to empathy, and it's like, hey, tell me why that's important to you, right? A long time ago, I have some really easy examples of this that it won't kind of rat anybody out, right? I maintain confidentiality, but one of these that I go to a lot is where there was a woman who really wanted to go back to school. She didn't have an opportunity to. They started having kids. The husband did very well financially, and she would say, I really feel like I need to get my education. There's that emotional bid, and what is he saying then? He's coming at it from there's no need. We make a lot of money. You're a great mom. And so he's like, that's ridiculous, right? So she starts holding that back. And then every time she's triggered by seeing, someone else that gets their degree or somebody that's doing something else, then she builds this resentment. She wants to go to her husband and talk about it, but she already knows he's going to shut that down. So something as simple as that can then start to drive this wedge in the relationship. So in that scenario, once we had the couple in there under this EFT umbrella, she's able to say, this is why school is important. And it went back to her mom had some struggles, and her father had left the home, and mom had to get a job, and so this education was important. He was coming at it from this place of, I don't like school, I finished, now I provide a good living, you don't have to go to school, right? And so once we kind of broke it down in the, why is this important for you? That makes sense. Why is, what's your experience with this? Then it was like, the clouds part and a rainbow and a unicorn came running by, and it was like, this is great, right?
Right.
Yeah. So then once you start hitting on some of those topics, imagine this relationship where you can come in and throw anything out there, and that's an emotional bid, and your partner even might monologue and say, oh, I want to fix that one, but tell me more about that, right? So that's kind of where we're headed with EFT.
Okay, so one last question before we move into point 4 is this. What are some, and I realize we can't unpack all this, and this isn't a group therapy session, a really big group therapy session.
Right.
What are some things that people can identify to watch out for as they're listening to their spouse communicate, or listening to anyone communicate, but specifically spouses, that they can identify as this isn't the appropriate reaction, and how to sort of control that? Like, what are things that, if this is what they're hearing in their head, they need to sort of silence that voice, and what's the appropriate response?
Great.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, great question. So we're going to go back to, if we are cultivating this listening, this ability to listen already, we're going to be aware of that. Now we've got the empathy, so it's like I care enough about this person that I want to know what their experience is, because the more we learn about them, the more data we're going to have. There's no doubt that we're going to learn more about our spouse or our children or in our work situation. We're going to learn more about that person. Things are going to make a little bit more sense. So already we're off to a good start with those first two. Now we're going to recognize that anytime I want to say, but that's not right, or why would you, that's going to be a trigger for us to say, I'm about to make it about me. So I want to find out more about where they're coming from. And I will tell you, I had a pretty intense session a little while ago with a guy who said, oh, okay, so I basically just have to say, whatever you think is right, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm saying, no, but once you kind of understand the person more, number one, that's gonna look different. And then there are still wonderful techniques. It's the semantics of language to say, that makes more sense. I hear you. I feel like you have done such a good job with here. I'm wondering if, you know, we might be able to, right? So you take all that heat away from that person, all that fixing and judgment, you do this wrong away, and you still get to say what you want to say. I mean, this EFT applies. I do it with families. I do corporate trainings at schools because it's a real good way to communicate, to be able to cultivate this ability to say whatever I want to this person I care about, not have it shut down, actually have them understand more about me. And the more we do that back and forth, we learn more about our partners, and we're able to kind of just say, man, let me take you on, you know, my train of thought. I go all these different places, and have your partner say, okay, I get that. That makes sense.
That's really, really good. Okay, number 4 is this, to get busy building a better marriage. Number 4 is what?
So number 4 is then celebrating a safe environment. And so that is the key to this. And we don't get perfect at this. We're not looking for perfection. We will still have our own days where we're hungry or angry or lonely or tired or any of those things. And we may come in and not respond adequately or not respond appropriately. But now we have this, if we're cultivating or celebrating a safe environment, we have this dialogue. Now we can say, man, I feel like you're kind of fixing me right now. I feel like you're judging me. And instead of the person say, you know, what do you expect from me? It's like, I'm so sorry. I'm going to double down on empathy now. Tell me what's going on for you. I wrote down, this is funny only to me because I've been bald for about 15 years. This is the lather, rinse, and repeat stage of this, right? So this is the part where we may have this great dialogue, but then we feel like, I don't want to bring this up again, you know, because I'm worried this time now he's gonna try to fix it, or this time he's gonna judge me for what I'm about to say. But this is where we kind of have to start, I don't know, trusting the process a little bit. So this is the part where we have to, if you know, a lot of times like that education example, we may have processed that, and the woman feels like she's much more supported and going back to school or whatever, and maybe a month or two goes by, and now she says, well, I haven't done anything about it. He didn't say anything about it. I don't want to bring it up again. That's old baggage that we bring into that, right? The rinse, lather, and repeat version of this, celebrating a safe environment, is now we know that we can come in and say, hey, I loved the fact that we talked about that piece of what education means to me, and I realized we haven't really done anything about that, and I'm worried that that's just going to kind of go. And because then already now we're going to find out, maybe the husband was saying, okay, well, I felt like I was the jerk when we figured that one out, so I don't now want to push, but I'm good for anything. So we're still working out of this world of you know, not having all of the information out there, and we're making assumptions again. So my goal is just this, being able to cultivate the safe environment, being able to come to your partner anytime, even if it's the same thing, because you know that they're going to respond appropriately.
Something that's interesting, and I've said this many, many times in here, and I'll say it again, is I'm not a therapist, right? So I'm a big advocate of when I sit down with a couple and they're struggling, first thing I say is, I'm a fan of your marriage. I'm a cheerleader for your marriage. I'm in your corner to fight for your marriage with you. But I can't go deep with you and fix your marriage. And that's going to be you partnering with someone who's trained to give you the skills and tools. But what I do often is I have sort of download sessions with people where they come and they go, well, we've been seeing a counselor. And then we get home and they lay out all of this junk that happens at home. And what I find is there's this imbalance. There's a safe environment. They see therapy as a place where they really can be vulnerable because there is the built-in, like you said, referee. There's someone there to help them manage the big emotions that spill out when they don't have control of them themselves. I'm wondering this, what is, and maybe this is a big answer, but what is a way that they can bridge the gap between that really safe environment of therapy where they feel protected, where one spouse who gets shouted down or gets a lot of judgment statements, where they can move that into, and maybe you've covered this already, what are some key phrases they can say to push back on the wrong reaction? They did an emotional bid, their spouse reacted inappropriately and are shutting them down. What are some things they can do to say, hey, I really need to feel safe in sharing this with you? How can they do that so they can bridge the gap between a therapy environment, what is safe, and home, which feels like...
So I'm gonna dodge your answer, and then I'm gonna come back to it. So, and I'm glad you said this. One of the biggest things here is, we're oftentimes we want to jump right to the the big ticket items, the top 10 things that we argue about. And we may read a book or go to one session and feel some hope, but we don't necessarily have the skills to go back in the home and process these big ticket items. So I often talk about go after the small victories, the low-hanging fruit, and under this banner of awareness. I want to kind of step back and have a couple say, hey, tell me what you're parenting. Tell me how you were parented as a kid, and there's going to be no fixing your judgment, because that is one of the first things that I found, especially working with couples who have parenting issues, is that they're coming from two different places, but they're even afraid to talk about what their background was like. But when your spouse, who you know now, or you're on the same page of we want to fix this, we want to make this work, then I want to know everything about you and how you were parented and how you were raised. And if you tell me that it wasn't the best situation in the world, I'm not going to say, I can't believe you didn't say anything to your parents. I didn't believe, Now we just want to know because we care about them so much. So we have more awareness around what was parenting like. What was your ideal vision of what a marriage was like? I find often I'm trying to sell this marriage of, the rainbow unicorn version, and I've got people that feel like, that's not real. Here's my version of what a real marriage looked like because of the things that they had been through. So sometimes I want us just to get on page and have awareness of just what life was like, what life has been like up to this point, because we're still back at this. We maybe have never been this vulnerable because we thought if I tell them about my background, they're leaving. So I don't know if that's a kind of a way to start that. So I would say start looking at these areas that are pretty fundamental: marriage and parenting, and what was your expectations of a career, and all these things, and just find out more about your spouse. Start there, and you'll start to feel like, okay, there's a little something there, there's a little connection. I know more about them. Plus they listened and it was nice. So I think that's the place to start.
I've and you may, as a therapist, tell me this is a terrible idea.
Sounds like a terrible idea, Chris. I would never say that. Watch me turn this to sound positive.
That'll be awesome.
Okay.
Take notes, folks. When people tell me that, and again, I always want to see them if they're in deep and big frustrations on their marriage. I like to see them in therapy. But in that week in between the sessions, I always tell them, bring in a regulator. I say, if you know that you have to have a big conversation that's going to be emotionally charged, go out to Chili's and have it there. Because you can't go crazy in the middle of Chili's. There's a waiter that comes up and goes, you need me to refill your water? And they break the cycle of those emotional buildups, that steam building up in there. And it sort of provides, I wouldn't say the therapist environment, but it provides a safe place in which they know tempers and emotions are going to be regulated. They have to keep their voices down, and they have to just really communicate. And it's like we pretend as if emotions rule us, and that we're just victims. We're taken hostage by our emotions. But if you're fighting at home and the phone rings, you pick it up and go, hello.
Right.
You can just all of a sudden shut it off, and then we hang it up, and we're back at it.
That's part of an EFT conversation where sometimes people will say, man, you treat me so bad, but then you're so great out there, right? And if that's being able to be said without you make it impossible. If it's like, oh, wow, okay, I hear you, and I can understand that's hard for you. Two quick ADD moments there. One, the Chili's chips and salsa are amazing, so that would do it, right?
And the queso is pretty,
Number two, I would love to just walk around my whole life with this music, right? I feel like everything would be better.
Nice.
It's really nice.
Soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly. But number three is I think that's a good idea. And we're also finding out more and more about movement. So, I'm starting to be a big advocate for, get out of the house, even just take a walk, right? Maybe walk around Chili's. I don't know how long you can do that before they're going to kick you out, right?
They call the cops.
Sure,
right.
But no, I do like that. That's a great idea.
We're going to wrap up. And again, I want to just reconnect you to the intent of what we're doing. None of what we do during a series or in an individual weekend is the cure-all to everything, whether we're approaching finances or family or spiritual growth or healing from abuse or whatever it happens to be that we're talking about, making progress in any area. These are all the beginning moments of moving us forward in that. And a phrase that I've become fond of, and I didn't originate it, is the best time to plant a tree is 25 years ago. Second best time is today. So a lot of us get caught up in the guilt and frustration that we weren't doing this earlier in our marriage, or we weren't doing this earlier in our family. We didn't land on this information quicker. And then we sort of feel defeated that we've wasted all this time, and there's no way to really take a marriage of 25 years and make it amazing for the last 25 years of the marriage. Or Whatever it happens to be, we sort of just stop and figure this is as good as it's going to get. And I want to tell you that the whole miracle, the whole win of a relationship with Christ is that old things have gone and new things have come. The old has been put to rest and the new has been resurrected with Christ. And so the idea that we can't have, however rough our marriage has been, or however average or mediocre or lukewarm our marriage has been so far, it doesn't mean it has to stay that way. And whatever tools you accumulated from your parents don't have to be the tools that you build your marriage with. Because our parents are human. And therefore, they were working with broken tools that they inherited from their parents. And even if their parents' marriage was perfect, it doesn't mean that your parents' marriage was the same as your grandparents' marriage. And so we all sort of devolve and we all sort of break down our own marriages and we sort of pass that on to the kids. And so my challenge to you is this: do the things necessary to leave your kids a legacy of a marriage they can imitate and emulate and copy and say, if I have a marriage, I want it to be just like my parents, because they were good at creating a safe environment for us to talk to each other and for us to talk to them and for them to talk to each other. And no, they didn't have a marriage in which they didn't argue. It's just they argued in a really healthy way in which they heard each other and they came to conclusions that actually moved them forward as a couple and put to rest frustrations that they were having. And so I want to encourage you to do things like this. So these were a little hard to get a hold of because there was limits on how many we could buy. We got a hold of 12 copies of this and they're at the bookstore. And so if we run out, we can try our best to get more copies, but this is at the bookstore. And what we're trying to do more and more is when we talk about something, put in your hands the tools to help you get started moving that way. But I want to encourage you, don't stop here. If your marriage is doing really, really well, then that's amazing and that's awesome. And be ready to do this. The moment it feels off-center, the moment it feels like it's starting to lose its momentum, the moment it's starting to sort of lose elevation, be okay with the idea that you can sit down with somebody like Tony and say, I don't know, it's been going really well and now it doesn't feel right. There's something off and we'd like to just sort of bounce some stuff off you and see if you can help us identify where we need to be working. But especially if your marriage is in crisis, can I encourage you in this? Don't wait any longer. If you broke your arm today, you wouldn't go into the garage and just say, I'm going to duct tape it to a 2x4 and just sort of hope for the best. All of a sudden, we become armchair psychologists and armchair therapists, and we think we can fix each other. It's the blind leading the blind. Sick people think sickly. Right? If you are not well, and then the flu's going crazy in California right now, when you get the flu, you just lay in bed and you forgot what it's like to feel healthy. And so it's not a perfect time to coach other people in healthiness either, right? And so when you're not doing well in your marriage, go outside of yourself and have somebody whose sole purpose is to help you identify healthy movement that you can make. And don't wait any longer, because I often have people that come to me and they say, I'm ready to get a divorce. And I think, that just came to you last night? Or has this been building up for 2 years? And it's just now that you're ready to get some help. Don't wait all of that time. Get in, get connected to help. And as much as I obviously believe in the practicality of Scripture and the practicality of prayer and the effectiveness of all of those things, God made us holistically. Sometimes God wants us to add practical solution. Right? The Bible talks about zeal without wisdom. Sometimes we need to add wisdom to our spiritual fervor. And you should be praying. You should be praying for your spouse. You should be praying for your marriage. You should be seeking the Word of God on all of those things. And then God also says you should go seek good wisdom. And so connecting in a moment like this and connecting with somebody like Tony is a really big win for your marriage. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me this morning? I'm going to ask you to respond, because I want you to take your first step towards building a better marriage this morning. Moving your busyness into, and I love what he just said, that sometimes we treat other people better than we treat our own spouse or we give them our emotional best. We give them our conversation best. We give them really our intellectual best. We just sort of offer the best to our friends at work, our neighbors, but we don't do that with our spouse. Maybe you're in the middle of crisis and you don't know how much longer you can go on like this. I know there's a lot going on, and it doesn't end here, but it does begin here. And so my question is this for you. If you want to begin today to take steps to build a better marriage, even if it's going well and you just say, I want it not to go well, I want it to go amazingly well. I want to look back on my marriage and know I left my kids a legacy of a really healthy, a very healthy marriage. Or maybe you're in crisis and you say, I'm tired of being in crisis. I want to fight for this. Can I have you just very quickly slip your hand up and then you can put it back down? Yeah, lots and lots of people. So here's what we're going to commit to together. Father, we come to you, some with broken hearts and some with enthusiastic and excited hearts. No matter where we're at, there's so many people in here who want to move their marriage forward, and maybe some that are just feeling too tired and frustrated or even hopeless to raise their hand. Maybe some that feel like their marriage is exactly where it needs to be and they don't need help. But the truth is, the word compares our relationship with you to marriage, which means that when you hold us accountable for our marriages, you hold us accountable to the standards by which you treat us, which means that all of us have room to move our marriage towards looking more like you. The way you extend and express kindness and grace and forgiveness and mercy and gentleness and compassion and intimacy. And so I'm praying for every single person in here, especially those who raise their hand, that today marks the beginning of them taking step after step after step, step at a time, moving themselves towards a better marriage. And that along the way, they just stop and identify, I can't do this alone. I need this help, and I need to do this, and I need to bring more people into this process because I can't do it by myself. And my spouse and I, we're not in the place where we have the health to move it forward, so we're going to bring somebody in to help add health there. So God, I'm excited about what's going to come from the decision to do marriage better, to build a better marriage. And so I thank you in advance, as if it's already been done, giving you praise now for restored marriages. A year from now, at the end of 2018, we're going to look at a completely different room of people whose marriages are in a completely different place because of what they decided to do today. In Jesus' name, amen.